Hey, it's me, Lex, back with another video. Today I'm going to be going over something a little different than usual, and I'm here on my Foundry virtual tabletop. The map I have is courtesy of Dr. Mapzo. I'll have linked in the description, as well as I will also have the artists linked for both Hazi's art token and Tiny's art token. Today I'm talking about the Proficiency Without Level variant rule for Pathfinder 2nd edition. I have it right here on my second monitor and I'll bring it over. The variant removes the character's level from their proficiency bonus. Whenever you're proficient with anything in the base rules of Pathfinder, you add your level to all of your checks with that skill. So your armor, your attacks, your actual skills, magic, training, etc. And this kind of results in like an uber heroic fantasy where in as few as 3 or even 2 level ups, something that previously would have been extremely dangerous to take on in a one-on-one fight or in a small group can become trivially easy to defeat. And some monsters that were already easy can become literal non-issues, where they're more or less incapable of harming you unless you just allow them to. And the goal of Proficiency Without Level is to kind of rein that fantasy in a little bit. The goblins that you face at level 1 are still going to be able to hit you as late as, level 7 or level 8. Your statistics are only going to increase when you get item bonuses or proficiency increases. And as well, of course, status bonuses and circumstance bonuses can still apply if you have various options that give you those effects. Like, for example, Sniper's Aim right here lets you spend 2 actions as a gunslinger to get a +2 circumstance bonus to your strikes. Things like this will still apply and give you bonuses, but you're not going to be getting stronger just from leveling up on its own. Not in your base statistics anyway. Your damage, the available options to you, the gold and items that you're going to be finding, as well as your own pool of hit points will still be scaling as normal. But you're not going to be critically hitting, say, a skeleton just because you're 2 levels higher than it. The stated goal of the Proficiency Without Level system is that it's designed for a gritty world. This isn't something that I necessarily agree with. I've found it to be more of a varied and realistic world. And moving more into some of the ways that this is seen in the game, here I have set up a small encounter. Tiny and Hazi, a barbarian and a champion, are taking a boat into the Arctic on a marvelous quest. They're on their way to defeat some necromancer in the far north. It's just the 2 of them. And their boat has been mounted and raided and stopped by this frigid magic. And a pack of ghoul soldiers have leapt up on board, carrying swords in one hand, using their other to pull themselves over the top. And as well, a skeletal horse has just finished an airwalk spell and landed on deck with a champion who is now commanding the group to attack. In the standard game, we would look at the statistics of the party. They are level 5 players, and so if they had their normal statistical bonuses, these level 2 creatures would be almost negligibly easy to defeat. Their statistics would be so low that you would be able to hit them on incredibly low rolls. They wouldn't be able to hit you unless they rolled incredibly highly. However, if I open up their stats, here I'll bring up the skeletal champion on the left and the ghoul soldier on the right, select them all, and I have a custom ability here or effect that applies the Proficiency Without Level modifications, you can see their stats are going to go down. It subtracts their creature level from what their stats are. This actually serves as a balancing thing because it is not added to the player's statistics either. As you can see here, Hazi, as a level 5 barbarian, only has a +9 on her attack rolls. It's 4 from her strength, 4 from her expertise, and 1 from her weapon potency rune. And so, as opposed to normally, where her bonus would be a +14, and she would be hitting these soldiers on a 2, she now has to roll a little bit higher. They're still definitely weaker, because they're lower level creatures. They deal less damage, only a d8 +3, and they are going to still have lower armor class. Here on my other screen, I actually have the building creatures guidelines. What's notable with removing the level from proficiency is, as you can see here, I'm going to move down to the armor class section of building creatures because this is where it's most exemplified. The average armor class of any given creature is the high armor class. And as you can see, it scales not exactly linearly. It'll start out at 15, and then it goes up to 16, stays at 16, but then jumps 2 to 18, and then 19, and then another 2 to 21, 22, another 2 to 24, 25 goes up to 27, 28, and then 30. Every so often it'll go up 2 instead of 1, which means that as these levels are increasing, monsters are still getting more dangerous to fight, irrespective of their actual level. If it was just their level that was modifying their stats, then this would be a linear 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, so on and so forth. And so when you remove level from creatures, it doesn't entirely remove variance. What it removes is, and this is something that some people think is, or feel is somewhat artificial in the system, creatures being particularly dangerous specifically because of their level. I have over here a Lang Ghoul that's actually been waiting at the top of their back mast. I'm not too sure on ship terminology, to leap down on them when they defeat the main group. So let's mark all of them as defeated. Let's say our warriors have beaten them back. They get ambushed by this creature here, the Lang Ghoul. And I actually have a modifier here that allows me to add back their level bonuses, so I will do so quickly to demonstrate the point. Tiny, a level 5 champion, has an armor class of 23. This Lang Ghoul, as a level 10 creature, has a melee strike bonus of +23. This Lang Ghoul cannot miss Tiny with its first attack, just because of its level. It is so high that even a natural 1 would be a success. My apologies. It can still miss exclusively on a natural 1. That's my bad. But as you can see here, the level differential is what is determining more or less victory here. And as the players grow in power and level up and gain access to more options, the level gap does become less important. I have been in several games where level 14 and 15 players are capable of defeating level 20 or 21 creatures, but it requires an immense amount of teamwork and effort and utilization of the system's basic math, with things like status bonuses, status penalties, circumstance bonuses and penalties, etc., to circumvent these immense differences in benefit. And in addition to that, the Lang Ghoul has 180 hit points here and deals 2d6 plus 8 damage, whereas over here the ghoul soldiers that they were fighting only have 28 hit points and are only dealing less than half the damage. So as you can see, the Lane Ghoul here is almost certain to win against our two heroes, purely because of its level. And of course, this does mean that you can balance around this. You select creatures according to the level. Some people refer to this as Pathfinder 2nd Edition's treadmill balancing, where as you level up, you have to face increasingly dangerous creatures, and creatures that once posed a threat to you no longer do. Some people view this as a bad thing. I don't necessarily view it as such, but I do think that it is important to take note of. But if we go ahead here and remove the modifier that is giving our players their level bonuses and apply Proficiency Without Level to this Lane Ghoul here, he's still stronger than our party. He still has an immense amount of hit points. He still has abilities kind of tied to his level that make him more dangerous, particularly of note here his paralysis ability, and a larger pool of hit points, the extra damage. His modifiers are still higher. His plus 13 against Tiny's armor class of 18 means that he's still going to be hitting on a 5, which is quite low as far as rolls are concerned, but the challenge is much more reined in. This is a lot more of a reasonable fight at this point between the party and this creature. And so in the Proficiency Without Level rules, it actually goes on to say here that it recommends adjusting experience points to the normal Pathfinder equivalent of party level -4 to +4, expanded out from -7 to +7. This works very well in many cases, although with standout abilities like, say here, the paralysis, the incapacitation trait means that this might end up being more vicious for our party than intended. For example, if he makes a claw strike here against Hazi, critically hitting, the fortitude DC against that is pretty high. Hazi's bonus is a +8. It's DC 18. A 10 or above would succeed on it, but it does mean that here Hazi would become paralyzed. And this is one thing to look out for, is that abilities specifically reliant on level, this includes spells, are still dangerous for their level, and you need to kind of bring that into consideration. But generally, your ability to utilize wider ranges of creatures is quite effective. Now, something that I have also been doing, if I move the Lane Ghoul out of the way here quickly, is I have been running Abomination vaults using the Proficiency Without Level variant. I'm going to be taking an early game encounter with a Wood Golem here, adding the Proficiency Without Level modifier to it. And you'll see here its bonuses are a +11 on the fist and a +10 on its splinter. That means against Tiny it's going to be hitting on a 7 or an 8 respectively, whereas in the normal balance of the game it would be hitting on much lower rolls. When there is an encounter that perhaps you want an enemy from a lower level band, you can see here the Wood Golem is only level 6, and the party is level 5. If you still want it to be a threat, and this applies as well for specifically various boss creatures that you want to maintain their solo abilities. My favorite thing with Proficiency Without Level is that you can simply apply those bonuses back. Here I have this as a boss modifier, where it modifies all of their statistics back up by a variable value. So here, with the Wood Golem, it's within the normal bounds of the game, and so here as a level 6 creature, if I wanted it to feel exactly like it would in the game's default balance, I can simply add the boss's statistics back by 1, increasing its stats. So here you can see its fist went up from 11 to 12 by boosting it by 1, and now it has that bonus that it would have comparative to the party, adding that differential back between the two groups restores the game's official balance and can mean that you can utilize creatures. Say I wanted this to be an extremely lethal fight. I want it to stay consistently strong for the party. I could boost it up by 3 here, and it would count as a severe fight, even though it is only a level higher than the party. You have the power to utilize the various statistics of the game in this way to sculpt exactly what stories you're looking to tell, using Proficiency Without Level as your basis. Another thing of note, not applicable to all games, but in a Westmarches setting where you have a lot of players in one place across a variety of different levels, having the players play without their level added to proficiency means that you can very easily have players of far larger level ranges combining their powers together and going onto the same missions together. So in addition to widening the amount of creatures and variety of creatures that you can use as the game master, it also allows players to experience a lot more than they would normally. Of note, because Proficiency Without Level does not change when you get feats or when you get your hit point increases or gain access to things like potency runes or striking runes, spell slots especially, it is still not entirely without power scaling. And this is something to be very, very careful with if you are going to utilize it in a method where you're going to bring large level differentials together into one. Tiny here is able to cast Sunblade at 3rd rank because Tiny is a level 5 creature, but if you very easily want to bring up his level to, say, 13, Sunblade is now being cast as a 7th rank slot and is doing far more damage. Let me put it out here. 64 as opposed to at level 5. If he cast it, it would do 2d4. That's 3 times damage, despite the fact that these two levels are theoretically compatible with one another. Spells, especially anything that goes by level rather than by proficiency, are going to stand out a lot more. Notably, as well, this also means that the more or less, not fake, but the level-based progression in the game being stripped away reveals what the system's basic math is. The entire game, and I'm going to bring up the building creatures guidelines here again. The entire game is balanced around the idea that a marshal or a caster is going to have roughly, without outside modifications like spell buffs or the aid action from their teammates, a 50% chance of success at just about anything they do. Those stats can go higher for things like skill actions, but generally that's the idea. And you'll see that when you remove level from the equation here, that remains the same. What changes is only the statistical outcome of targeting things above or below your level. Keeping things relevant for longer periods of time kind of brings everything closer to that 50% chance. And it means that when you do get those proficiency increases, so say Tiny at level 7 as a champion, getting expert proficiency in armor, means that his AC goes up to 20, which is going to be a pretty significant bonus, but it's just as significant as it ever would be against level 7 creatures. The changes only spread out when you start utilizing creatures from different levels. And one last thing that I wanted to touch on with Proficiency Without Level is that, and this is actually a way to utilize it without the variant being enabled. Say you're playing a normal game. So I'll add Tiny's statistics back to him here. Tiny is a level 5 champion. He has a 23 to his AC. This ghoul soldier is only level 2 and only has a plus 11 to his attack rolls. He would have to roll a 12 just to hit Tiny. He only has 28 HP. Tiny's plus 14 against this ghoul soldier's AC of 17 means that Tiny is hitting on a 4. This ghoul soldier is not going to pose very much of a threat, and that's to be expected from a creature 3 levels lower than the party. If you want to utilize creatures even in default game balance outside of their level ranges, you can take the exact same math that makes Proficiency Without Level function and reverse it. So here, this ghoul soldier as a level 2 creature, I'm going to increase its statistics by 3. So this will make its stats roughly equivalent to a level 5 creature, but it keeps its hit points and its damage the same. So now you see its armor class is 20, which means that Tiny here needs to roll a 6 to hit it with his plus 14, which is in fact better than a 3. Not a whole lot better, but it's now much more likely to be able to run up to him and hit him with its sword slices and do some damage. It's more likely to be able to survive a turn or two, because there is much less of a guarantee that a hit is going to crit. Natural 20s notwithstanding, obviously. But if you want to be able to utilize creatures outside of their level ranges in the system's expected math, you can take Proficiency Without Levels modifications and reverse engineer them. This also works in reverse. If I were to take, say, the level 10 Lang Ghoul here and go up against Tiny with expected statistics for a level 5 creature, I could, and here I don't have a specific automation set up for it, so I'm going to use Proficiency Without Level and then boost his stats back up by 5. So the net change here is that I've modified the Lang Ghoul's statistics down to make him a level 5 creature, in quotes here. And now you see Tiny's strike bonus of plus 14 hits on a 10, but this guy also hits back on a 5. We've brought back the exact same math by changing that level differential, and this is what I love the most about Proficiency Without Level, is that you can take the modifications that it presents to you and implement them in a whole variety of ways. Being able to bring lower level creatures up, being able to bring higher level creatures down. It does that by default if it's just the rule set that you're using, but it applies just as well to the game's default expected system math, and that's something that I very much appreciate as a designer and game master. One last thing I want to touch on before I close out this video is that it does have some problems. As I think I already outlined fully enough here, some people claim that it's impossible or difficult to make solo boss encounters function, which they do in the game's normal math. I believe I've outlined properly here that they still work plenty fine. whether it's by just utilizing a higher level creature, like this Langul, being 5 levels higher than the party, and being able to show itself as a significant enough threat through those smaller incremental bonuses as level gaps get wider and wider and abilities get stronger. Or even just by taking a creature that is around your level and utilizing the exact same math to boost its statistics back up to the level of something that should feel like a real threat. Essentially emulating a pocket of proficiency with level within your game of proficiency without level. But the major issue that I have always had with proficiency with level, and am still continuing to as I utilize it more, is that the simple DCs don't work. Treat Wounds, for example, here. It has a Train DC of 15, Expert DC of 20, Master DC of 30, and Legendary DC of 40. These are just the standard simple DCs. And the Proficiency Without Level variant rule does suggest modifying it to a 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, so in increments of 5. However, I've found this to not work particularly well, and especially with things like Assurance, where normally you would be getting your level to make up these bonuses, but under Proficiency Without Level, you're not. There are various adjustments that you can make to these modifiers. We're experimenting currently with increments of 2 for the DCs, so it would be Trained as 15, Expert is 17, Master is 19, and Legendary is 21. We're going to be trying out more things like that in the future, and making it so that Assurance just automatically succeeds, but only at a rank lower than what you attempt it with. Overall, though, these are things that generally aren't going to be affecting the moment-to-moment gameplay, and they're small enough subsystems as normal DCs still work plenty fine. If I bring up here in the journal, I prepared the Abomination Vaults toolbox here. So if you're currently going through Abomination Vaults as a player, don't listen. I'll put a timestamp to where you can skip to in the description, and it'll be in the time bar of this video as its own section here. But if we go into the adventure toolbox here, we'll just go to the, say, library. It's on the 3rd floor here. In the not so private reading room, let's say, there are some secret walls that the party can discover if they look through. These checks are just generated as per the normal guidelines of the game. Being on the 3rd floor, the library, the party is supposed to be level 3 when they get there, and level 4 as they exit, which means that, say, Tiny here was searching. Not the most perceptive, but you could see the bonus here being up to a +8 if someone was an expert and had high wisdom. I just give them an untyped bonus equivalent to the level that they're supposed to be at. This is an easy way to adjust DCs. You could also go in and edit the message and lower the DC by the amount that the level should be. For example, here, I move it down from DC 23 to DC 20. And then you would see that Tiny here, were he a little more perceptive, could succeed on this with a 12, which is generally what it expects. This is a little bit of a difficult perception check to make, even if you're searching. And welcome back. But generally speaking, you can create your own effective and standard DCs relatively easily. The only thing that is actually a challenge and that requires some method of working it out with your team, with your group, and making it work are these set DCs of 15, 20, 30, 40, or even 15, 20, 25, 30. Neither work particularly effectively in my experience and will require some modification. It's not a big enough downside to completely push the variant rule to the wayside, and in fact this is swiftly becoming my preferred way to play the game because of the just wide berth of versatility you can implement onto the game when the numbers are stripped down like this. But that's all up to you. And now I'm going to leave you with a short combat demo. The ghouls heave their way over the sides of the ship, one hand latched to the wooden, ice-covered boards, their others clasping long swords. A skeletal horse flies in, ending an airwalk and clattering down onto the deck, mounted by a skeletal champion. He extends a blade out and hefts his shield in front of him, utilizing the defending exploration activity, and declares "Charge!" as the foes attack our party. The encounter begins, and I add all of them to initiative, and roll everyone. It looks like our party is going to be slow to act, as we are going to head off with this front left ghoul soldier. He's going to charge forth at our champion, moving in behind him to set up a flank with his party. His stench aura is going to perhaps make Tiny nauseous. But Tiny is able to resist the aura effectively. The ghoul soldier is going to swipe in with his blade, missing the champion. The mounted skeletal champion is going to command his horse to charge the foe in front of him. It does so and spends its last action rearing, attempting to kick Hazi. It successfully lands a blow against the barbarian, dealing a bit of damage. And then the champion on top raises his shield and takes a swipe of his own with his longsword. But he misses. This next ghoul soldier is going to push his way over here through the cluttered fish, take a swift leap over the boxes here, and then take a swipe at Hazi from behind. Actually, he's going to two-hand his blade instead. This next ghoul is going to push his way up onto the front line, flanking Tiny and taking a swing with his bastard sword after two-handing it. It'll hit and do some damage. The skeletal horse should not have a turn on the turn tracker, so I'm going to simply remove it. There we go. Alrighty. Oh. There we are. This ghoul soldier is going to move forward, two-handing his blade as he goes, and end here. They've all but surrounded Tiny. But with that, it's Tiny's turn to go. He is going to take a step over to the left, and I believe he is going to... Actually, he's going to not take a step yet. He's going to cast a spell at the skeletal champion, attempting to break their ranks with a sun blade. He holds his blade aloft and targets the skeletal champion, channeling the power of the sun to smite his unholy foe, and hit with that sun blade, doing an immense amount of damage to the skeletal champion, as all of that holy damage is brought down upon him. He's resistant to some of it, but it does pierce through his difficult to damage bony armor. Tiny will then spend his last action raising his shield once more. Hazi is going to spend an action beginning her rage, getting some temporary hit points and additional damage. She's going to attempt to push through, channeling that rage into vitality damage with her spirit barbarian powers, and then strike at the skeletal champion. She'll hit him and do an immense amount of damage, as barbarians do, which will knock him off of his horse and into the fish. With a loud clatter, his sword and shield go flying across the deck, and the ghoul soldiers are sent into disarray, which I will represent with Frightened 1. I also now do need to add the horse into initiative. Hazi will then spend her last action moving over here to assist Tiny with the group of ghoul soldiers. This last soldier, seeing his skeletal leader fall, will run up, grab his shield from the ground, which I will transfer over, and then charge in with his last action, becoming no longer frightened at the end of his turn. This next ghoul soldier, seeing the opportunity behind him, is going to first strike at Tiny, two-handing his sword to begin with, dealing some decent damage, but then will, with his third action, step down into this boat to provide flanking for the other soldier. The horse is none too pleased with the events and is going to leap into this bag of fish, which will lower down and eventually snap at the bottom as it flees to tell the necromancer of the goings-on. This ghoul soldier, having just seen Hazi defeat their leader, is going to run up to her and attempt to slice at her twice with its bastard sword, but will miss both attacks. The ghoul soldier to the north of Tiny is going to delay until after the soldier to its side who takes its turn to step down and then strike after two-handing its sword at Tiny. It'll miss because of Tiny's raised shield and the frightened caused by Hazi. And then we'll return to the still frightened soldier on top, who is going to simply swing 3 times at Tiny, critically hitting on the second blow, although it rolls very poorly and Tiny is fine. It is then Tiny's turn, and Tiny is given the ability to react. Tiny will take a swipe down at the ghoul soldier that he is flanking with Hazi, dealing some sizable damage. And why not? Lay hands on the ghoul soldier, expelling some magic, vitality magic into it. It'll roll a critical success on its saving throw, taking no damage, unfortunately, and Tiny's last action will be to re-raise his shield. It's been defending him quite well, after all. Hazi is able to take her turn now, taking a swing at the ghoul soldier that she's flanking with Tiny. We're going to use a hero point on this because this is an important blow. And a 22 will bring that guy down. Her second action is going to be simply moving up north slightly to attempt to block off more of the passageway here. And then a follow-up swipe at the ghoul soldier that was to her right. It'll do some damage. And then we'll move on to the ghoul soldiers. This one is going to take advantage of Hazi leaving it opening and step into the corpse square here, which I count as difficult terrain, to continue making swipes at Tiny. Two-handing its sword as it does so, its last action is a single strike which critically hits Tiny, doing some pretty sizable damage. But that ends its turn. The one below here is now stuck and cannot proceed, and so must strike at Hazi. It will do so and hit, dealing 5 damage, which Tiny will use Retributive Strike on, giving Hazi some resistance. She'll take no damage, and then Tiny does not have the ability to reach that ghoul soldier to make his own attack. This man is going to continue to strike over and over at Hazi, but will miss the next 2 strikes. This other soldier is going to move up, attempting to tumble through Hazi, but failing, attempting once more and succeeding, getting past her, and continuing to strike at Tiny with its last action. The one to the north here is going to continue its onslaught of Tiny. The flanking position it has is quite effective and would have hit had Tiny not raised his shield. Tiny doesn't like what's going on here and is going to make a Sunblade strike against the ghoul directly to his south. He makes the attack and hits, and deals a sizable amount of damage. But unfortunately it's not enough to push through the ghoul soldier's defenses. Tiny will raise his shield once more. Hazi's going to take a strike at the most injured ghoul she can see, missing unfortunately, but critically hitting on the follow-up attack, which will do a huge amount of damage and send this ghoul soldier flying, and he rolls down the stairs, disappearing below deck. And then Hazi's last action here will be to stride into the square occupied by the corpse, attempting to block Tiny off from getting flanked. This ghoul soldier here is going to attempt to reposition Hazi, and will in fact succeed, moving her down. No, to the side. Its second action will be to move into the flanking position, and its third takes a strike at Tiny, once again only missing because of the shield. The one to the right, then, is going to attempt to deal with Hazi, striking and critically hitting for quite a lot of damage. Tiny's Retributive Strike is going to give Hazi resistance against this blow, causing her to be much less affected by it, and then Tiny also gets to make a strike against this ghoul soldier, hitting and dealing some severe damage, keeping up the pressure. This ghoul soldier did not like that at all, and is going to realize that the rest of them are choosing the best target here, as they focus in on the champion. This last ghoul is also going to continue the laying into Tiny, hitting twice, which is going to bring Tiny near death with only 14 hit points remaining. Tiny's gonna have to hold out here. Laying hands is no longer an option because he's used too many focus spells. So he is going to, yes, take a hand off of his shield, dropping it to the ground, spending one action, battle medicining, and as I said before, I adjust the DCs for my game to 15, 17, 19, and 21. He can only target the DC 15. That'll pass, healing 2d8. A decent amount, 11 HP. That'll be his first action. Then he will two-hand his bastard sword. Oh, it was two-handed the whole time. Whoops. And he's going to attempt to finish off the soldier to his right. And will do so as it drops to the deck. Hazi then is going to step into flanking with this ghoul soldier below and take a swipe at it, hitting, almost critically hitting, doing some very sizable damage. And then she's going to attempt to go for just a kick, which will hit with a combination of the flanked, and the agile did not make the difference there, but it's always important to attempt. This ghoul soldier is now collapsed in this slot, and the last soldier is going to get probably one more turn here, which is going to be him running, leaping into the fish, which drops him to the ice below, and then he begins to run off to let the necromancer know that the adventurers are coming for him. As you can see here, the party faced a group of creatures 3 levels lower than them, and although this was a party of only 2, they faced a sizable amount of challenge. This is because of Proficiency Without Level. It carried a lot of its weight in ensuring that these creatures were capable of standing their own and fighting their own under these circumstances. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know what you would like to see in the future, and see you next time.